Okay. So, welcome for any of you that have been here before, welcome back. And for those of you that are new, welcome. I hope you find this informative and helpful. I'm going to present. Great. So, what we're going to be tackling today is Koine Greek verbs. And Koine can be exceptionally complicated. It's just one of those languages that can be very, very different from those of us that are English native speakers. And so verbs are one of those things that are just, they can seem wildly different. Of course, as I explained last time, word order in Greek doesn't actually matter. And so that's one major thing that can trip us up. And then tacking on top of that, another major difference from Koine to English is inflection. You have things on the end of words that indicate to us in the Greek whether it's talking about singular or plural, what person it is, if it's first, second, or third person, also what gender that word is. And so again, if you're a native English speaker, you won't be used to that type of thing. For us as scholars who work with this language, obviously, as I say every time, it's so important to have a good grasp of Koine Greek, and unfortunately that means kind of going to these tricky, tough areas, as you'll kind of see today. But I'm going to do my best to really slow down with some just basic stuff to do with verbs that we see in the New Testament in its original language that help us understand what's going on. If you have any questions, use the Koine study thread, and I'll be kind of paying attention to that as we go. But we're just going to hop right in. So just to review a bit, for those of you that have been here before, we remember that Koine is what we call an inflected language, whereas English is analytic. And again, what I mean by that is in English, word order matters a whole lot. Okay? So when we say the phrase, you hit me, or I hit you, the order of those words determines to you what is happening. And so very basic, this is the structure that English will often use, right? We have the subject, and the subject is the one doing the action. There's the verb, which is, of course, the action word. And finally, the object, which is the recipient of the action. Meaning, when we apply this structure to this sentence here, you hit me, we see subject, the action, the one doing the action, we see the verb, the action word, and me would be the object, right? So you are hitting me, I'm receiving your hit. Likewise, though, if we actually flip who is on the beginning and who's on the end of these sentences, it totally changes the meaning. And so when I say English is an analytic language, remember this word analytic? That is what I mean. It's just referencing this order. And this order is going to be important for us today, but where we'll focus is this verb. Again, in Koine then, you say, well, word order does not matter. And I don't know if any of you speak a different language besides English. But for the most part, in many languages, word order does matter, and so it can be really tricky, right? So in Koine, the phrase hit you me and I you hit actually could very well mean the exact same thing. And so you say, well, how do you know? How do you know when the Bible uses this language? How do you know who is doing the hitting? If you were to take this, because it does not use this structure, right? We have the verb here, but we have no idea, we have no way to differentiate if you or me is the subject, right? So how do you know? And again, for those of you that have been here, this is where we use inflection in Koine Greek. How we answer that question is by using inflection. So again, just a bit more review. So then what is inflection? Well, inflection is things that are, I'm going to change this color because I just don't like it. Inflection is basically endings that that Koine Greek tacks onto the end of words to indicate who the subject and the object are, right? So if you were here with my nouns and declensions lecture, you will know that os indicates that the word is the subject, and on indicates that it is the object. But a bit more so than that, we know that on is what we would call masculine singular accusative. Okay, again, I'm using some terms that people who have been in my other lectures will be familiar with. And os is masculine singular nominative. Okay, so we know that then this word Alex is the subject and Bob is the object. So we can read this, Alexos hit Bobon. They mean the same thing in both Koine and English, because in English, with the word order means that Alex is doing the action. Here's the verb, the second word, and the object, the recipient of the action, precedes the verb. In Koine, instead of word order, it's just what is on the end of words that determines how you know who is doing the action. So again, in this sense, we see same sentence, Bobon hit Alexos. This sentence means the exact same thing as Alexos hit Bobon because of the case ending. Okay? We see the on and the os. Therefore, we know. In the third example, hit Alexos Bobon, we know that Alexos is the subject because, again, just simply that case ending. So for those of you that weren't here in my other lectures, hopefully that gives you a bit of an understanding just as we move forward, because that will be necessary. And so then if we look here at John 1:1, this is John 1:1 in Koine Greek. So in English it says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." I'm sure you've heard this verse 1,000 times. In Koine, this is the preposition en. It means in, it can mean other things, but with a dative, for those of you, again, that were here in my second lecture, you'll know that arche, which means the beginning, this is in the dative form. So en with a dative means in the beginning, he was the Word. But you wouldn't read it like this. So you see in English it says, "In the beginning was the Word." Okay? So, but the word order here in Koine states, "In the beginning, he was the Word," or "it was the Word." But remember, word order in Koine doesn't matter. So you couldn't just translate directly from Koine. You need to look at those case endings on nouns. So again, here, as I indicated, arche is one noun, and it's in the dative, which means it acts kind of similar to on, which would put it in the, not the object, but the indirect object. Os, we see up here, right, indicates the subject. So this is kind of its own clause. Don't worry about anything over here. But if you were just to take this, you have two nouns, you say, well, who is doing the action in this clause? Is it the beginning or is it the word that is doing the action? You have to identify which is the action word, which is ein. Okay, this is the verb. which just means he, she, or it was, right? It's kind of like saying I am. Just being, or if you were to say I am, that is a verb, right? It's kind of like saying I am, I exist, I have essence. That is a verb. So saying he was, that's the action, okay? Or it was, that's the action. And so we can determine then that the subject is doing the action. Logos is doing the action. So this makes sense to be translated, in the beginning the word was, right? You can kind of smooth that out a bit, and so you come up with in the beginning was the word. So hopefully that kind of makes sense in terms of like how we determine what is the subject and what is the object, what is inflection, because that's going to matter a lot today when we're doing when we move into verbs here. All right. So just moving on. So now let's talk a little bit about verbs themselves. In Koine Greek, and again, I want to remind you, this isn't just some language. This is the language that the New Testament was written in. Okay, and so I find, just for me, I have great respect for the biblical text, not just for faith-based reasons, but I think it is a beautiful and complicated language. And it's very cool then that the Bible itself would be written in this language, the New Testament, that is. And so verbs are complicated, but there's so much meaning within them that we severely miss in English. So, just to give you a very basic rundown of what verbs are. If I were to say he is reading the book, right, is reading, that is a verb. It's an action word. Or if I were to say God is loving, right, just saying God is loving, it depends how you're using the word loving. If you were to say God is loving, the world, that becomes a verb. In this context, you might say this is an adjective, it's describing God, and therefore is would be the verb, but that's a matter of semantics. Anna is sleeping soundly, of course, right? Sleeping, that action. And Levi is climbing the tree, right? Obviously, climbing is the action word. I'm sure all of you know this very well. However, what's interesting in English is, and really any other language, when you add words beside or very close to a verb, it changes kind of the inflection, you could say, or the way in which you want that verb to be understood. To give you an example, this sentence here, he should pray, right? This isn't saying he is praying, that this person, which would give you a picture of someone who is currently, in prayer. But this is very different. By adding this word should, it kind of gives a different flavor to the sentence. Like you're saying that you ought to do this. This is something he should be doing, right? And so pray is our verb, but just adding that word should changes the meaning of the sentence. And that's very important for verbs. Likewise here, he was hit by the ball. Well, if you just said he is hit by the ball, or he is hitting the ball, or it can make it sound like it's more in the present. It is currently happening. But by adding this word was, you indicate a place and time, right? You want to specify a place and time in which he was hit by the ball, right? So obviously you're saying, well, this happened earlier, backwards in time, right? It's a temporal thing. Thirdly, he will drive the car. This isn't he is driving the car, or he drove the car. He will drive the car, right? He will. So if you were to say this, you're obviously wanting to talk about something that will happen in the future, right? So again, it's a bit of a temporal flair to it. So as I say down here, in English, verbs are often temporal. This is kind of the key word. They are often temporal. Temporal simply means that they say something about the time in which they occur. Example, if I were to say I ran, that's in the past, right? Or I run, that's in the present. Or I will, we just saw this word, I will run, that's happening in the future. And so most often in many analytic languages, such as English, when we use verbs, it is trying to tell you about that verb's position in time, okay? So again, that's very, very, very important to keep in mind. I'll just remind you, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to put them in the Koine study chat there. Okay. So we need to talk about some terms a little bit before we continue on. Two of these terms, again, for those of you that have been here, you've seen these terms before. But we're just going to talk a bit about terms a bit, because as we start to move forward and talk more about Koine verbs and how the Bible uses verbs, these terms will likely come up quite a few times. In fact, I've probably said a few of them already. So the stem, you're probably familiar with this. The stem is simply the basic part of the verb which is disconnected from the ending or the inflection. It is kind of like the stem is what makes the word the word. All right. So, for example, if we look down here, you've probably seen or heard this word logos, or logos, logos. If we were to cut off the stem, we would draw a line right here. We can see that os ending that you've seen quite a few times now. We cut that in half and over. So over here, we take the stem of that word, log. Okay? That's how you pronounce log in Koine, and the stem then is your os. Okay? So this part of the word, the ending, this changes all the time, because that's what tells you how the word is operating within the sentence. This part of the word, the stem, right, the stem, this does not change, okay? Now, there can be things that are added to, the front of the word in some cases, and there are things that are added to the back of the word in some cases. And see, I have arrows going everywhere. But the point being is that log will always indicate that you are trying to say the word, right? Logos means word in Koine. So whenever you see log, that is the word for word. And that will always be true. All right, so that's stem. And the ending, I kind of explained it a little bit, is instead of the front bit, we're just talking about the other side. I'll use a different color. It's easier to see. We're just talking about that ending, all right? And so it's the same here. We cut off the stem, okay? And we just talk about the ending. Now you're probably looking at this going like, well, how am I supposed to know which is the stem and which is the ending? But that is a matter of practice. I have a lot of practice doing this. This is what I do for a living. So don't feel too bad about it. But just know that these are the differentiations. Just for completeness, I will do the stems in blue, and then the endings are there in kind of this red color. Okay? Next, we have number. Now, if you've been here before, you know what number is already. But if you haven't been here before, thankfully number is extremely easy. We're just talking about, is it singular or is it plural? Okay? So within verbs, they will always answer for you if it's talking about something plural or if it's talking about something singular. All right? And this is kind of the nice thing that you're going to be introduced to very quickly when it comes to Koine verbs. Just the verb itself tells you a ton of information. What person it is it plural or singular, right? What tense is it? What voice is it? What mood is it? And I'll explain all of those terms. Okay? In some cases, what gender is that verb is. Most verbs do not have a gender. Some of them do. A very specific category of them do. All right. So, just looking through some of these words that we have, I'm not going to talk about logos because that is a word we've talked about a lot. Well, actually, I may as well. I think it's just helpful to have the example. So, just looking at the stem, we see lu-ace, pronounces lu-ace. Okay, so here's the stem, lu, and this simply means luo would mean like I am loosing, or I am setting free. All right, lu-ace on the other hand, this means you are loosing. The reason why I know that is because we take the stem, we know, okay, this is the word for loosing. Okay. This is the word for loosing. But you want to ask, well, who is loosing? And how many people are loosing? And that's when you look at the stem then. So you say, okay, this means loosing, and I know because of my great memorization work, and I'm an excellent Greek scholar, that you get to look at this and say, well, this is second person singular, right? So therefore, how do you say loosing in second person singular? You say you are, right? This is something you are doing. And when I say you, I don't mean more than one. I mean just you. You are loosing, right? So that's how we would translate that. Okay. So again, this is not, this second word, logos, is not a verb. But we just look at this and we say, okay, the stem means the word word. But you want to ask, is the word plural? And how is the word, and how is the word acting in the sentence? It's a bit different because it's a noun. But we look at the stem, and we know because os is masculine singular nominative, the key word there is singular. Okay, os tells you it's singular. So you would never translate this as words with an S on the end. You just translate it as word. We know that's masculine singular nominative. Another verb, though, again, we look at the stem, blep. The lexical form is blepo, and this simply means I see. Blepo, and it's kind of standard, just means I see, like I can see, right? So I see, and we look at the ending here, omen, which is first person and it's plural. All right, so first person plural. Therefore, we could, how do you say something how do you say I see in the first person plural? Well, it's the word we. Okay, so instead of I see, you would say we see. So I hope you're kind of understanding how this can come together. It's the same with this akuo. Aku is the stem for I hear, and o is the first person singular. And how do you say something in the first person singular? You just say I. So akuo means I hear, right? And don't worry about angalu, because that is a noun. But I hope you're starting to get the picture when I talk about Koine verbs and person and number, okay? You can't look at an English verb such as, well, here's an English verb, identifying. You can't look at identifying and already know number or person. You just can't. That's not how English works. Whereas in Koine, how the New Testament uses verbs, we can take away all of this really cool information out of it. Okay, so we're just going to talk a little bit about what I mean when I say tense, voice, and mood. So typically, when we talk about tense, we've referenced this already a little bit. When I talk about tense, we are referencing how the action operates in time. Okay? In time. In English, again, we use the temporal in many cases. However, Greek, okay, so Greek, on the other hand, sees the actions by their completeness. They often don't talk about the time, all right? And this is something that when we want to understand the way Jesus speaks, in Koine, in the original language of the New Testament, when Jesus says that he is doing something or he has done something or something is coming to pass, he often is not using something to refer to an action in time. That is an English construct in many ways. Whereas he is talking about their completeness. And you're probably like, well, what does that mean? To give you an example, we just saw this word akuo. This means I am hearing. I just said originally this meant I hear, which is true. But what's more accurate to translate akuo is I am hearing, because it indicates that it is happening in the present. But the way in Greek, what you need to understand is not that it's happening in the present time, but that this is an ongoing process. You are in the process of hearing. Okay? So when I say Greek sees actions by their completeness, that's what I mean. So it would view akuo, I am hearing, as an action that is not complete. It is currently going on. Okay? But over here, ekusa, you probably see, well, that sounds a bit similar. Akuo and ekusa, these are actually the same verb, but they are in a different tense than one another. So this in akuo is the present tense, so we can mark that as present. Okay, meaning it is currently unfolding, whereas ekusa is in a different tense that we call the aorist. Okay, aorist. And what the aorist means is that the action is complete. So if akuo in the present tense means the action is ongoing, and you could translate that as I am hearing, how do you translate I am hearing as a complete action? You would say I heard. Okay, I heard. But you want to say, well, Alex, but that is, oh, you can't see what I'm writing. You can't see what I'm writing. Oh, that is, let me check here. Thank you for letting me know. I appreciate that. So I need to make sure that you guys can see this. I've been writing this whole time. Okay. Okay, it shows on my recording that you can see this, but it might be a Discord thing. I'm just gonna stop the stream and restart it here right away. So if you guys could just rejoin. Share your screen. Okay. So you guys should be able to see now my writing. Can you please confirm that you can see this? Okay. That's my apologies. The good thing is on the recording, it's picked up all of my writing, and so you'll be able to see it from here on out. Okay? So, anyways, as I was saying, so this is just how Koine differentiates between verbs, not through time, but through completeness. So again, Jesus might say the word akuo, and you know that he's talking about his process of hearing something is ongoing, right? Or it's currently happening and it's not yet completed. Whereas ekusa, in the aorist, means that Jesus is his process of hearing has been completed, right? So you cannot think about it in terms of time, but in terms of completeness, and that can be very, very tricky for English speakers. Next is voice. Oh, and I should say about tense, like as I wrote here, don't worry, we're only focusing on the present tense because there are many tenses in Koine Greek. And I would say actually tenses are some of the most interesting things in Koine because they draw out so much exegetical goodness, you could say, right? Whereas in English, our language just doesn't do justice the meaning of what the Bible is often trying to get across to us. So the second thing here we have is voice, okay? We have voice. And voice is pretty straightforward. So there are three voices in Koine Greek, and they are here: active, passive, and middle. The active voice, so I'll draw your attention down here, simply meaning the active voice indicates that the subject of the sentence is the one doing the verb, is doing the action, right? The passive voice then is just the opposite. The verb is happening to the subject, okay? So if the active voice says God loves you and God is the subject, God is doing the action of loving and you are the recipient of that. But if you want to flip it and make this a passive sentence where the subject, the verb is happening to the subject, you would say God is loved by you, right? God isn't loving you, you are loving God. Okay, you kind of flip it on its head a bit. And so Koine Greek uses voice all the time. So for instance, akuo, again, I know from my training that this O, if we were to split off the stem, remember the stem from the ending, I know that O indicates an active voice, right? So that's why you would translate that as I am, like I am hearing, or I hear. The subject is doing the action. Often in Koine Greek, you see in the passive, there's almost always this word by that exists, because that's a great way, it's a very easy way to kind of flip a verb on its head and say that the subject is the verb's happening to the subject rather. And we call this an agent marker. Scholars, we call this an agent marker, and you don't need to worry about that too much, but often that is represented in the Greek by this word upo. Kind of looks like that. And so often when you're coming across a verb in Greek, how you know that it is passive or middle, these two are what you're kind of usually trying to differentiate between, is this word often comes up. Upo, okay, and that means by. So then the middle voice, if the active voice, the subject is doing the action, the passive voice, the action is happening to the subject. The middle voice is a bit weird in that it indicates the subject is carrying out the action, but the action kind of has this special implication or meaning towards the subject itself. So you could say something like God loves himself. God is doing the action, but he's also the recipient of the action in the same way. Okay? Another way you might say is like, you washed yourself off, right? You cleaned yourself, or the dog cleaned himself. So, something like that, right? But there are other ways. The action may not be as completely directed towards you, but it could have like a special implication for you. You might say like, for instance, when Pilate, here's a good example. When Pilate basically says to Jesus, like, hey, I'm washing my hands of you, like I'm ridding myself of you, and like your blood is not on me. Those verbs are often in the middle because he, as Pilate says, he is the subject. He's like, your blood is not on my hands. I wash myself of you. That's kind of what the middle voice would be, right? Okay, finally, so we've talked about tense and voice. We're going to talk about mood here. Mood, you don't need to worry about too much, but just know that what we'll be talking about today is the indicative, by the way. If you're familiar with this word, you know that indicative kind of just means like, indicative often means like this is what reality is, or it affirms reality. And so the definition here affirms the actuality of the statement. So if you were to say, God loves the world, you are making a statement about reality. Like, this is something that is actually happening in reality. It's not a possibility. It's not, something to come, but rather this is something that is actively happening. And we call that the indicative mood. So today, what we're focusing on is the present tense, which again just means that the action is currently ongoing. The voice, we're focusing on the active, which means that the subject is doing the action. And finally, we're focusing on the indicative, right? Which means that these verbs are making a statement about reality. If you were to do further Koine study, like if you guys were to take this in seminary, for instance, or something like that, you would talk about the imperative, which is a command. So when Jesus says love your neighbor, right, love your neighbor as yourself, that is a command. So by saying love your neighbor, there's an action word in there, and that action word is within a command. So it is the imperative mood. So it's kind of like it's the emotion behind the verb in a way. That's how you can think of mood. The subjunctive is the word contingency here is, some people use the word like a wish or a desire, or like, it's something that could come into reality. It's not in reality yet, but this could happen. So often you see the word if, or you see the word should, or shall, or ought to. It's like, hey, this could happen. So if you love God, so this word love will be in the subjunctive. And finally, there are other moods, by the way, but these are just the big ones. The infinitive expresses a verbal idea, so it expresses an action without indicating person or number. And so often it's just to say to love or to be. So the very famous kind of Shakespearean phrase, to be or not to be, those are two infinitive mood verbs, right? It doesn't express who is to be or what is to be or how many of those things are to be. It's just to be. It's just kind of floaty out there in the ether. That's kind of the way that I like to think about it. Okay? So that is mood. Again, you don't need to worry about that too much. Just remember present tense, active voice, indicative, mood. And so if we put all these together, we literally call the verbs that we're looking at today present, active, indicative. And this is how we kind of parse them out. And I will show you that now. I think now. Pretty sure it's coming out. Yes. So, this is kind of grainy. I apologize. I did a bit of a photocopy from one of my textbooks. However, this is present, active, indicative verbs. So this chart will show you everything on this side. These show you the actual endings, and they show you how you would kind of translate them, right? So O is first person singular, I am. Ace, second person singular, you are. A, third person singular. This can mean he, she, or it is, and that of course just depends on what context it's being used in. Omen is first person plural, so if we could draw a line here. Above this is singular, below this is all plural. Ete, right here, this is second person plural, so when you say you are, this you is being used in a plural way. Okay, so like you group of people. And then usin is simply third person plural, which we translate to they. Okay, so all you have to know is that present, active, indicative are one of the most common verb forms in the Bible. And all they indicate is that it is currently unfolding, right? We know that from the present. So they're present. And all of these verbs that I have written above we'll go through. They're all present, active, indicative. So present, it's happening in time. It is like ongoing, it's currently unfolding. Active, which simply means that the subject is doing the action. And indicative, which simply means that these verbs are describing something about reality. So, let's go through these now, shall we? Remember, easiest way when you're first learning, cut off the stem like this. Okay, cut off the stem from the ending. So I'll just do that. Cut off the stem from the ending. And all we have to do is know how to translate the, whoops, wrong color. Know how to translate the stem. So lu, if you remember, means to loose, right? You're loosing something, you're setting something free. And o is the thing that changes, is the inflection. So if you just look at the chart, you say, okay, I see here, this matches O and O. Okay, so therefore you know it is first person singular, so I am can be added in there. So this is translated as I am loosing. Okay, I am loosing. Excuse my brutal writing there. Okay, second one. We look at the stem, leg. This means to say or to speak. Okay? And we look at the ending, a, say, okay, there it is. Third person singular. So this means he, she, or it is speaking or is saying. Now, you would determine whether to write he, she, or it based on the context. So oftentimes you look at the sentence, and the subject of that sentence is Jesus, and it might say like Jesus lege, and it goes on. Well, you know that Jesus lege, Jesus, he is saying, right? Remember, answering these questions, present, it is currently unfolding. Active, the subject is doing the sentence, and it's saying something about reality. So if you know all of that and you see Jesus lege, Jesus, he is saying, you can safely translate that as such, like he is saying, because you can answer all of these things about the verb just based on this ending, right? Ekomen, again, ek means I have, or like to have, kind of. Omen, you match this up, okay, this is first person plural down here, first person plural, which translates to we are. Therefore, you can safely translate this as we are having. Or you could say like we have, but we are having is good enough. Okay, we are having. Now, I'll just give you a few more examples, and we're kind of coming to the end here. We see usin. Oh, I did that backwards, didn't I? Oh well. Usin and graph. So we pronounce this graphusin. Okay. Graph means like to write. As a noun, often like graphe would mean like scripture or writing. But as a verb, of course, it means like I am writing, or someone is writing something, or someone has wrote something. In this case, we know it's present active indicative because of the ending, and we match these up, and you say, okay, that is third person plural. Therefore, you could safely translate this biblical word as they, right? They are writing. So I hope you kind of get the idea of what's going on here. This is absolutely key to start to grasp as you begin to look at Koine Greek sentences. Like if you want to do a Koine Greek word study from the Bible, and this is something you struggle with, it's going to be very, very, very difficult to adequately pull out information from that language. I would venture to say that verbs are the single most important part of Koine Greek, right? You have to begin to understand this and move forward with this in order to engage with the language in a meaningful way. It will just be too difficult to get much meaning out of it elsewhere. So again, just really quickly through these, cut off the stem. Here's the stem. You match the stem. Say O and O. Ginosko means I am knowing, or I know, right? Ginosk is like I know, or to know. And O, first person singular. Over here, ace ending. Cut that off from lamban. Lamban means to take or to receive. So, okay, to receive, and ace, you match it with second person singular. So you are receiving, right? You are receiving. Finally, ete and didask. Didask means like to teach. It often refers to teachers or teaching. So in verbal, you look at this ete and you match it with ete here. You are in plural, so you plural, like you multiple people are teaching. Okay? That's how you would translate all of those. All of that is on the recording. Great. All right. So, one last thing. This is the final thing that I will talk about today, and arguably the most important. The subject of the sentence will always agree. I cannot stress this enough. Will always agree with the main verb in the sentence in person and number. They will never, ever disagree. What I mean by that is you need to identify the subject of the sentence, right? And then you will automatically know that the main verb in that sentence will be the same as the person and number of the subject. So let me give you an example. In this sentence, we see os, ho, theos, so the God, or we just translate this as God. Os indicates the subject. So just looking at this already, we know that God is the one doing the action because he is the subject. All right? So now we need to identify the verb. Well, some of you might already notice this is the verb we just saw on the last page. And finally here is the other noun. So we have noun in theos, verb, noun. How do you know who is doing the action? Well, ignoring the fact that the subject is the one that does the action, we can match person and number. So theos is singular. Okay. It's a nominative, so it's the subject, and it's masculine. Lege, we want to cut off the stem from the rest of the word. A from leg, if you remember, leg means like to speak or to say. So if God is speaking or saying, how many people and in what person is that happening? Well, because the narrator is doing the one talking in the sentence, this says God said to the Son, right? God said to the Son. We understand that because lege and theos match in person and number, as well as we identify theos as the subject. So A is second person singular, right? The narrator is telling us, the narrator of the sentence is telling us that God is doing something. So remember, he, she, or it. So we're talking about God. Lege matches that. He, she, or it. This is that ending. If you remember, if I scroll back up, right here, lege, right there. So you can safely translate this as God, he said, or he is saying. He is saying, and this phrase here simply means to the Son. That's how we kind of arrive at that translation. All right? So to answer the question, how do you know who's doing the speaking? The answer is A, who is the subject? That is God, os. And B, who matches in gender, or excuse me, in person and number. God and lege match one another. They always agree. Okay? That's how you know. So that kind of brings me to the end. I can go through a few more examples and show you how these phrases are translated. But do you guys have any questions? I've been talking for like 50 minutes. Not that I don't mind talking. No? Good. Hopefully that means I did a decent job of explaining it. Okay, well, if there's no questions really, I don't mind just explaining these phrases because there's some Greek phrases and I show you the translation and where that actually is. So this phrase, idou apostelo ton angelon, simply means, behold, I am sending the messenger. In bold here I have the verb, sending, right? So you look at this again, isolate these two from each other, right? We have the stem and the case ending, or the ending. O, that's why this is first person. We can identify this as first person singular. And apostel simply means like to send. You probably recognize the word apostle out of that. The word apostle in Koine Greek is apostolos. So to make that a verb, you would say apostelo, first person singular. So if you remember first person singular, translate to I am. We know, again, I know that this is present active indicative. So this is something that is ongoing. That's why you would translate this. This isn't like completed. It's not, behold, I have sent the messenger. No, it's present active. Therefore, I am sending the messenger. That's how we would come to that. So idou means like behold, and ton angelon, it means the messenger. Some of you might recognize this word here as being derived kind of from angel. So a quick tidbit, angels in we use the word angel, but in Koine Greek, I mean, angel almost invariably means messenger, and that is often their role within the biblical text. So I am sending the messenger. Okay. See the next one in Mark 8:24. Blepo tous anthropous. So this means I see people or humans. Again, cut off the stem from the ending. We know this is first person singular. And we know that this kind of means like the and humans. So very simply, I see people or humans. Notice again, this word blepo does not speak to necessarily when you see people or humans, because Greek words are not that concerned with time. They're concerned with if the action is ongoing or complete. Therefore, it's an interesting translation to say, they didn't even, translate this as I am seeing people or humans. Rather, I see. It is present active. Therefore, it's an ongoing process. I see them. Okay? I think it would probably be perfectly fine to translate this as I am seeing people, or I am seeing humans. Finally, this is a bit of a tricky one, but this says lege. We've seen this a few times. This is second person singular, or I'm sorry, this is third person. Get rid of that. This is third person singular. So he, she, or it. In context, this is she, and we just know that from what story is being talked about. So she said, right? Leg means to say, third person singular, therefore she said, comma, oinon uk exousin. Okay. Oinon, we see the on here. This means wine. Uk is kind of like a negative, so it means like it just means like no or not. Whenever you see this, that just indicates there is a negative, and oftentimes the negative is attached to a verb, as we have here. So again, we separate that ending, right, from the stem. Ex or ek means like to have, and usin we know is third person plural, so we translate that as they. So they have, right? So this would be translated as they have, but again, you got to remember we see a negative here, so they do not have, right? That's how we would kind of do that in English. And then you're answering the question, well, what do they not have? Here's the noun. This is the noun for wine. Therefore, she said, here's the verb, first verb, she said, comma, they do not have, subject, adverb, which is just the negative, and wine. Okay? So again, the expectation for you listening to an hour of me explaining Koine verbs is not so that you will, pick this up and be like, oh, I just get it now, and you can just parse through present active indicative verbs. No, of course not. And don't feel like if this is still confusing that you just need to get this. That's not the case at all. What I recommend is looking at this chart, okay, that is in a few places in this presentation. I'll share this presentation with you. Look at this chart and practice identifying. So you look at those endings, okay? Being able to identify those endings and what do they mean. Being able to see this O ending and just knowing that is first person singular. And therefore, all you have to figure out is the stem of the word, right? So in this case, luo, right? First person singular, you just know that means I am, and lu means loose, to loose. Therefore, I am loosing. All right? It's just a matter of practice. And then you'll be able to look at the Bible and recognize it. So, I provided an area where you can have plenty of practice. Look at the word, right? Cut off the ending from the word and just work through. Use the chart that I provided. Try to translate those. Down here, I provide for you all of the vocabulary, because you're not going to know what blepes just means or what blep means. You can look down here and know that blep means I see, but then you're going to want to look at that ending and ask yourself, how does that change? If you were to say blepo means I see, how does adding ace then change what that translates to? Okay? So there is area for you to have some practice as well. So yeah, that's your introduction to Koine Greek, Koine Greek verbs rather. For those of you that listened to me today, I highly recommend you go and watch the first two sessions, both of which have been posted in the Koine study thread. Just scroll up a bit. I think they may have even been pinned by moderators. And this will be posted there as well. I think this is a really unique opportunity for people to start to learn Koine Greek. We're not to toot my own horn or anything, but where else are you gonna be able to learn such a cool, complex language that actually has a serious and significant has serious implications for the biblical text that we read. I think it's very, very important to have a bit of a grasp of these languages. But just as a reminder, it's not important for you to be an expert. You know, my life, for instance, is doing biblical scholarship and Greek scholarship, and so you know, don't worry about being an expert. But I think it's super cool if you're able to have a bit of a grasp, whether you lead a small group, or you just attend church, or you just want to know more about the Bible, even if you're not a Christian or something. I think these things are incredibly important. So yeah, thank you folks. I'm going to stop the recording there.